Hello, 285. I wanted to go over some things for this week and next week. So we are halfway through our first sprint, and really we've just been setting up our project board, our Kanban board, which I can see here under projects. And I'm going to go to this one to look at. Okay, remember you have your options to move items here as we go. Now, for this week, I'm going to want you to read chapter 8. Again, a lot of things in the earlier chapters, it's like, well, this is something you might need to know later. Chapter 8 is very much directly applicable to what is a user story, how do you write user stories, and I'm going to go through this process. I also recommend, as I mentioned, you watch the video that deals with Airbnb. I know Airbnb isn't the most exciting project, but that's okay. Okay, I'm going to write my first user story here. Pretend I hadn't write this one yet. I'm sort of starting over here. As a player, I want to. So we're doing kind of a Fallout type thing. Experience points. Okay, great. Okay. And when I've written this user story here, I've marked as an epic because it's many different user stories. The example in chapter 8 talks about different accounts, like ATMs. If you look at page 146, 147, that's a good example. I have a thing I want to do, and it's like, okay, there's all these parts. So if I want to see my account balance, there's several different types of accounts. In our case, we're going to break it down into, well, what does this involve? I go to the vault, I explore, I fight, I get loot, I get treasure, and then presumably I can wear loot and I can spend XP. So they mentioned something called invest. Okay. Invest is describing user stories. All right, so if it's an independent user story, so INVEST, okay, I'll go through these one at a time. How do you know if something's not a user story? If it violates invest, it probably isn't, then it probably is an epic. So you can implement it on its own, okay? So as an example, I'm going to break down combat in a minute, and I'd say, well, I could make a game where you fight one combat, and that's the whole game. You can implement it on its own. I can make a game where you explore with no combat. It's a walking simulator. And these are all independent stories. Negotiable. It's not fully locked down, okay? There's room for discussion. If you say it's going to be exactly this, you've gone too far for a user story. Now, you may start saying we're going to use this database and this and all that, and those are notes you're making for tasks that you as a developer will need to implement to complete the user story, but that's later. Don't get ahead of yourself. All right, so by valuable, we say things like, well, if I say I'm going to make the database, that's not valuable to the user. That sounds a little weird, right? But what it means is if the database exists but there's no UI, the user can't tell. They have no way of knowing. So again, remember, we're not talking about listing every single thing you're going to do to write code. We're talking about attacking it from the user side and focusing on what are the things we can deliver to them directly that are going to give a value. So there are things we're going to do that won't have direct product value, but they're not user stories. So this is the correct grammar, estimable or esteemable, but you can estimate the thing, okay? So we're going to get into estimating. There's a thing called planning poker. There's a lot of different ways of estimating how you plan how long something takes and how you track how long something takes. And that's got too many files open. Okay, small. In a full scale, 6 to 10 per sprint. Okay, what do I mean by this? If you have a full sprint in 2 weeks, think about that. You're going to be working 40 hours a week for a developer, not you here at school. I don't expect you to put 40 hours a week into this class. But the idea is if you can get 6 to 10 done per sprint, then each one of them takes 1 to 2 days of full development. So let's say, 5 to 12 hours, something like that, 5 to 10 hours, maybe 8 to 16. So we're going to try to aim for 1 or 2 of these. Okay. And testable, I think, is pretty explanatory. You can you can definitely say this works or it doesn't work. Okay. So something like I want to have fun, no, but I can fight around in combat, yes, absolutely. Okay. So I'm going to take my epic. I'm going to try to break this up. Okay. And I'm going to say user story exploration. Okay, good. Okay. And these are all as a player because we only have one role. You know, in more complicated programs, yes, you're going to have different roles. As an administrator, as a user, as a sysadmin, as a customer, as an employee. Think about something like Amazon. You've got buyers and sellers, right? I buy the product, somebody else has to ship it, or maybe like eBay is a good example. As a player, I want to fight mutants so that I can earn treasure and XP. Okay, and you don't have to make the wording super fancy here. Loot to find and use ancient technology in order to become more effective. Okay, and you could word this however you want, but let's say story advancement. As a player, earn XP, spend it so that I can become effective. Okay, and I should reword this just to match up. Let's edit that note. That I can become more effective. Okay, so now we've described our gameplay loop. I'm not going to whiteboard for you here, but you know this as an epic, and I'm going to go ahead and convert these. Okay, and convert these to issues. Okay, great. Now what I should be doing, and if you haven't started doing that in the past week, you want to do it this week. You're going to take one of these and you're going to start implementing it. Now you're probably not going to finish it. And if we were doing the full process, you know, where we were doing multiple, you know, like I said, if it was a 40-hour week, you'd be doing maybe, you know, 5 or 6 of these in a 2-week period. So you'd be doing a couple every 2 days. That gives you an idea for how small these features are. So, you know, I'm talking about a pretty small game. Maybe I can go into one vault. You know, later I'd have to add things like, oh, there's multiple vaults. Okay. All right. So let's say now I want to take this user story here. I'm going to move combat over here. Okay. And I go to, let's just click this and go see my card. And I'm going to assign it to myself. I'm going to set it as a user story. Okay. Let's click away. And let's go look at that issue. Okay. Okay. First pass. All right. So what I would do is say, okay, great, cool. Now I'm going to go to my code area and I'm going to start working on code. While I'm at it, I wanted to mention a couple of things here. So if I go to desktop, great. I recommend using GitHub Desktop. There's a couple of different options. It is a pretty convenient program. What it will let you do, and it kind of shows you here, is when you're working on code, you can directly see when you've checked things in, what the check-in was that you did. So I'm going to start writing my program, and I'd write like one round of combat, you know, just simple menu-based program. And then what I would do is, when I check it in, I would associate it with this issue, issue number 6. Okay, hopefully that'll get you started. Again, any questions, please hit me up and we'll talk about it. Thank you.